Hey guys, Valaris here. For the past few days, I've been working on a major update for my Oracle Wyvern build. It now has even more damage and clear speed than before, and has also doubled its previous health pool, sitting at over 12k ES. This was not accomplished with expensive gearing. The build is now actually cheaper than it was before, thanks to a completely different method of scaling damage. For those who haven't seen the first build guide, this setup features extremely high single target damage, vaporizing any Uber Pinnacle or Citadel boss, fantastic clear speed with full screen AoE and great mobility, and it is now also very tanky. It is a relatively cheap build to set up. Outside of my Headhunter, the majority of my gear pieces cost under 2 divines each. There are no mandatory expensive uniques or lineage supports. As an example, here's a T3 Zesht run using no Rakiatas and no Rigwalds on my Flame Breath, just regular supports. Flame Breath still pops him in about 2 seconds. If you're interested in trying the build, please watch the entire video. This is a very tight and specific setup. If you do not follow closely and understand what you're doing, the character will not function properly. So what's the difference from my previous build guide? My original Wyvern character was a crit setup with armor ES scaling. However, it's quite expensive to scale crit as a druid, as the top left section of the tree just doesn't have all that many good crit clusters. This means you have to make up for the missing crit with really good crit gear, which gets very expensive very quickly. This doesn't make much sense to me to invest into, given that Wyvern already has so much damage at a baseline. So I intended to try out a non-crit shaman version of the build instead. But when I set the character up in POE, I realized that even as a non-crit Wyvern, Oracle still offers more than shaman. This is because of the insane synergy between Oracle's Unseen Path and Entwined Realities nodes with the unique jewel Heroic Tragedy. The Verana variant of Heroic Tragedy, which grants the Black Scythe Training Keystone, causes your strength to instead grant 1% ES per 2 strength. It additionally changes all of the notables in its radius to powerful Kalguran notables. These notables are much stronger than standard ones, featuring perks like 40% damage increases or 40% max ES. Oracle has special synergies with these notables, as it can jump straight to them without taking any small nodes. But in addition to this, Oracle's Unseen Path grants access to the node Powerful Casting, which grants 2% spell damage per 10 strength. This has incredible synergy with Black Scythe training, as it allows us to scale our damage and energy shield simultaneously. Additionally, because we are now a CI build, we can stack as much rage as we want without having to worry about Berserk's life degen. This means we can take the mystical rage notable for 2% spell damage per rage, and use Crown of Eyes to transform all of our spell damage to attack damage. I currently have over 400% spell damage on this build without clicking a single standard spell damage cluster or taking any spell damage on gear due to all the scaling from strength and rage. The Oracle jumps with this setup are honestly hilarious. The top left section of my tree looks like a bunch of Christmas lights. With all of this damage, we no longer need to scale crit, freeing up the points to grab CI and get super tanky. This also makes gearing easier because we don't have to worry about chaos resistance, armor applies to elemental damage taken, or crit suffixes. Before I get into the gem setup and passive tree, a brief overview of how the character actually plays. In single target scenarios, Wyvern needs to generate power charges to empower its abilities. Versus map bosses, you often enter with power charges already up, so you can just pounce to mark the boss into Flame Breath. If you have no power charges, we generate them with a combination of Eyelith's Chimes and Culmination 2 on our pounce, combined with attack speed and combo generation supports in Shred. We are using Shred instead of Rend for this because it has a much higher attack speed, and because we would rather have damage focused supports in Rend for our map clear. Because we now do so much damage, we've sped up the initial combo to just Ferocious Roar for Rage before the boss spawns, Shred for 4 combo, Pounce, and then Flame Breath. For map clear, we are using Rend with Herald of Ice chaining, and a hybrid Pounce Blink setup, stacking cooldown reduction for mobility. As soon as you enter a map, you want to Ferocious Roar for maximum rage, Rend monsters 4 times for combo, and then Pounce for a power charge to empower your Rend. Whack something with Lunar Assault every 40 seconds or so for Bater's Vengeance, and then just spam Blink, Pounce, and Rend for the rest of the map. The core gameplay loop is identical to the original build, just speeding up the bossing combo because we have so much damage now. We don't actually need to empower our Rend. Let's move on to the gearing. For our talisman, I'm using a Magi Talisman with elemental damage rolls. A Magi Talisman is pretty nice to have, but it is not mandatory. You can run any of these 3 talisman bases here, Fungal, Magi, or Thunder. Fungal has the highest attack speed, so it feels the nicest for map clear. Magi is really nice for overall damage because it gives maximum rage, and Thunder Talisman has some really good base lightning damage. Jade Talisman technically has the highest overall DPS, but the attack rate is very, very low, so in practice, it doesn't feel that good for map clear. Now, the primary reason we are using an elemental talisman is simply because it is really, really cheap. To buy a rare talisman on one of the good bases that has an open prefix so that you can add Gain as Fizz for Herald of Ice Chaining, plus either tier 1 or tier 2 lightning and cold or fire damage costs like 3 exalts. It costs absolutely nothing to get these bases. I'll put a link to the search parameters I used in the video description below. If these bases end up getting a little bit more expensive because people buy them out, there is no problem running a physical base. There's very little difference in practice for this build. It's just a little bit cheaper to get a good elemental base at the moment. I would say the only big advantage for using an elemental base is if you get one with a really nice flat cold roll, then potentially if you get 2 rare rings with really, really good flat cold, then you can still get pretty good consistency on Herald of Ice Chaining, even if you drop Pulsar Kiln. Once you acquire the base, the rest of the crafting process is very simple. You just use Dextral Crystallization with Perfect Essence of Abrasion to add on Gain as Fizz. This is so your Herald of Ice can deal physical damage, armor break, and proc armor explosion. Then you add on 3 suffixes, Desecrate with Amannamu for attack speed, add on Perfect Essence of Haste, Perfect Essence of Battle. You may have to cycle this a couple of times in order to knock off the 3rd undesirable suffix, but it generally doesn't take too long. I got quite lucky crafting my talisman. One of my 3 exalts when I was adding suffixes added on a nice attack speed roll, and then my haste and battle didn't knock it off, so I didn't bother desecrating this. We're using the same talisman in both weapon sets. You just lock it up here. And then on weapon set 1, we are locking it to Wyvern form. Weapon set 2, we are selecting Werewolf form. This is because I have Rigwalds, which gives damage in weapon set 2, and I have it on my Flame Breath. So I want my single target setup on weapon set 2, which is my Shred and my Flame Breath. If you don't have Rigwalds, you can flip things around, but that might make it harder to track my build. So I recommend just using the same thing. I want to reiterate, you do not need Rigwalds and Rockiatas. You can just use Rageforged and Concentrated Area instead, and it has the pretty much exact same bossing DPS. You don't need these. I literally just threw them on because I already had them from a different character. Next, we have Crown of Eyes. These are really, really cheap. They cost 5 exalts at a baseline. This is just so that we can get increases to spell damage also apply to attacks. I would pick one up with 2 sockets or a good corruption because, they're really cheap anyways. For your chest, just get as much ES as you can and then some resist and faster start of energy shield recharge. For your rings, 1 slot goes to Pulsar Kiln, just get a corrupted one because they're so cheap anyways. If you get enough cold damage on your talisman and your rings, in addition to picking up Heavy Frost and Thin Ice for some freeze buildup, you can potentially drop off Pulsar Kiln. I just keep it simple and run Pulsar Kiln because it's just very, very consistent. In high elemental resist and elemental ailment threshold maps, Pulsar Kiln will mean you can still Herald of Ice chain just fine. If you're running a rare ring, you might run into some consistency issues in those maps. But again, if you get enough damage, you can potentially drop this off. Other ring, just get some damage, rarity, resist. If you have leftover suffixes to use, you can get something like strength or all attributes. Amulet, this is probably the most expensive rare slot because you need to pick up at least 56 spirit for this build, alongside whatever else you can get, right? Some ES, max ES, global defenses, spell damage, resists, rarity, all attributes. But it is a little bit pricey because you need so much spirit. Potentially, you can get a Spirit Corruption on your Crown of Eyes to kind of relieve how much spirit you need from your amulet, but Spirit Corrupted Crown of Eyes are kind of expensive. For your gloves, just pick up something with big ES and then some resists, attack speed, rarity, speed of ES recharge. These are really easy to craft, by the way. You don't need to buy an expensive one if you don't want to. This cost me 15 exalts to craft with an Omen of Putrefaction. You can also just buy one with a magic pair of gloves with big flat ES and a good suffix, and then use a greater essence of enhancement, desecrate another prefix, and use 2 greater exalts for the suffixes, and that's a pretty cheap way to get good gloves as well. Boots, move speed, as much ES as you can get, rarity, resists. You do have to get at least one flat life regen roll on one of your gear pieces. You must have this, otherwise you will die instantly to Berserk degen as soon as you swap the CI. As long as you have even one life regen on gear, this will counteract all of the degen from Berserk, from Savage Fury, etc. For your belt, Headhunter if you can afford it, of course. It's just really, really nice for map clear. This build actually doesn't benefit from Headhunter as much as others because our mobility is mostly based on Blink and Pounce, which are cooldown gated, rather than movement speed. So Headhunter is kind of primarily just for big AoE. If you can't afford a Headhunter, I would just run a Darkness Enthroned, or I would run a Temple modded Soul Tether. In general, if you just prefer being tanky as opposed to having maximum clear speed, then a Soul Tether is super, super nice so that you can get access to ES Leech. Currently, I'm not bothering with any kind of leech from Soul Tether or Essentia Sanguis. I'm just stacking a pretty decent amount of faster start of Energy Shield Recharge and Energy Shield Recharge rate on the tree, because it kind of synergizes with Wyvern's base passive of 50% faster start of Energy Shield Recharge. And with this big of an ES pool, you don't really get one shot, you kill everything else in one shot, and then you just start recharging up. I have not died on this character since like level 90 when I respec CI, and I'm currently level 97. Right, so I don't think any kind of ES leech is mandatory when you have this big of an ES pool, but if it makes you more comfortable, you can run that instead of Headhunter. Flask, these kind of don't really matter. Neither of them do anything. Blood of the Warrior, if you hit this, your rage doesn't degen. Doesn't really matter because you can just hit Ferocious Roar for max rage anyways, but there's not much else to do with the life flask slot for CI. And then other slot, Lavianga Spirits, also not particularly important. We don't use a whole lot of mana on this build because we're just rending, and then you just Flame Breath once. So this slot also doesn't really matter, but if you have a Laviangas, then you never have to hit a Mana Flask, and you can also potentially like anoint or use a Megalo for something like Stimulants, one of the Flask effect benefits. For our charms, if you can afford a Rite of Passage, that's fantastic. I'm kind of cheap, so I didn't buy a move speed one. I'm just running a Spirit of the Ox for some slow potency reduction, increased elemental ailment threshold, and reduced damage taken. This is primarily just for the rarity. If you can afford one that gives movement speed, those are really expensive. I think the lowest is like 200 divs. It's nice to have if you want to keep amping your clear speed. Silver Charm, so that our speed is unaffected by slows. And the last slot can go to either a Thawing Charm or a Stun Charm. I would recommend a Stun Charm personally. I was using one for most of this character. The reason I dropped it off is because I'm now using a Megalomaniac that gives me Ignore Pain, which gives every rage also grants 2% increased stun threshold. I have 70 rage in one weapon set and 85 rage in the other weapon set. This means I'm getting 170% stun threshold, so I don't need a stun charm anymore. I don't really get stunned anymore, but if you do not have that, then I would recommend a stun charm instead. For gem setup, our Rend is supported by Minion Pack 2, Rapid Attacks, Magnified Area, Ancestral Call, and Elemental Armament. In my previous build, I was running Ambush because we were running crit. Now, because we are CI, we can run Minion Pact on our Rend, and it won't really kill our wolves because, Minion Pact sacrifices 150% of my max life. My max life is 1, so each time I Rend, one of my wolves takes 1.5 damage, right? Doesn't really do anything, so we get access to a nice 35% more multiplier. Shred, supported by Rapid Attacks 3, Practice Combo, Blazing Critical, Rage 3, and Crescendo 2. Pounce, supported by Brutus Brain, so that our wolves are immune to damage. This keeps them alive for Predator's Mark. Rapid Attacks 2, Eyelith's Charms, Culmination 2, and Cooldown Recovery. Make sure that your Pounce is in both weapon sets, otherwise when you switch weapon sets your wolves will despawn. Flame Breath, supported by Momentum, Rigwald's Ferocity, Elemental Armament 2, Rockiatas, and Minion Pack 2. Again, for the third time, you don't need these. Please don't feel compelled to buy these. These are if you literally have too much money and no idea what to do with it, then you can buy these. Oh, Flame Breath is in weapon set 2. Next, we have Lunar Assault with Bawter's Vengeance, Freeze, Prolonged Duration, Embitter, and Minion Pact. You pretty much just use this every 40 seconds or so to get your Bawter's Vengeance up. Make sure you're at maximum rage before you actually Lunar Assault, because Bawter's Vengeance gain as cold scales off of your rage. Next is Ferocious Roar, socketed with Echoing Cry, Efficiency 2, and Raging Cry. This is in weapon set 2. And if you do not have Rockiatas, you can put Exposing Cry here as well to lower boss resistances a bit. Herald of Ice, make sure this is 20 quality, by the way. It gives a lot of extra radius to Herald of Ice, and before you swap to Herald of Ice, make sure you can use at least the level 17 or 18 gem. Before that point, you should be just using a Herald of Ash setup, because unless you get a high level Herald of Ice, your Herald chaining is not going to be very consistent. Armor Break 3, Uruk Smelting, Magnified Area, Armor Explosion, and Longshot. If you are trying to run no Pulsar Keln and just run 2 rare rings, then replace your last slot with Freeze. Next is Berserk with one of the Uhtred's supports. If you can afford the Uhtred that lets you use 2 supports, then you can use the Diala's Desire as well. This is like completely unnecessary amounts of damage. This is like if you're sitting on like 1,000 divs and like what do I spend it on? That's something you can spend it on. Blink, supported by Atziri's Impatience, Rapid Casting, and Mobility. Atziri's Impatience gives 100% CDR, and normally when you use the skill, you lose 25% of max life, mana, and ES. But because Blink is a reservation support, or a reservation skill rather, it gets around this, and you don't actually lose anything when you use your Blink. So that's very nice. Mana Remnants, Blink is of course in both weapon sets. Mana Remnants, supported by Harmonic Remnants, Remnant Potency, and Katal's Rejuvenation, which gives up the 40% CDR when you're clearing. You don't have to go out of your way to pick up the Mana Remnants, just pretend this doesn't exist, and you'll be at 40% CDR. You do not have to max the level of your Blink and Mana Remnants. Like, the Mana Remnants mana doesn't really matter because we're using Rend, which doesn't cost any mana. And honestly, a Blink that's like maximum level goes kind of too far for my preferences. You start to kind of like blink into walls a little bit more. So what I do is I just get as much int as I need for my actual gear equips, and then that's the level I put my blink and mana remnants at. I don't bother getting more int. I just pump the rest of that into strength for some more spell damage and more ES. Savage Fury, this is in weapon set 2, supported by Prolonged Duration. Very important detail for Blink. Blink has this very unfortunate problem where if you hold spacebar for just a fraction of a second too long, it'll just change straight into a sprint, which is really, really annoying because it kind of interrupts your movement. So what you have to do is either tap sprint really fast, just like instant spacebar tap and lift your thumb, or if this is too annoying to do and kind of upkeep constantly, you can use an auto hotkey script to disable your sprint temporarily. This is legal, and I'll link a guide on how to do this in the video description below. Next is the passive tree. Weapon set 2 is highlighted in green, this is the bossing weapon set, and weapon set 1 is highlighted in red, this is the mapping weapon set. If you followed the previous build guide, this is very different from before, so make sure you pay attention to this part. So first we come out towards powerful casting for 2% spell damage per 10 strength, then we grab plus 6 rage on both weapon sets, but we take the plus 15 rage only on the bossing weapon set. This is because the inherent rage loss is just way too annoying while mapping. You're constantly degenning rage. It's not worth it. You don't need that much damage while mapping. Next, we come over here to pick up Zealot's Oath and transform it into Black Scythe training with Heroic Tragedy Verana. It must be a Verana jewel. Pay attention when you're buying these because sometimes people will try to scam by putting a bunch of jewels next to each other, and some of them will be Olroth or Medved instead of Verana at the same price. So double check before you purchase these. These cost about 3 divines each. If you do not know how Heroic Tragedies work, each of them has a different seed. This one is 5591. Different seeds will have different notable transforms. They all draw from the same pool of Kalgurin notables, but different notables on your tree will get transformed, kind of like randomly based on your seed. You're not going to get the same seed as me, so what you have to do is buy one, put it on the tree, check what notables you got. If you got at least, I would say, 4 good notables in your jump radius, then that's solid. If you didn't, you sell it off for the same price you bought it, buy another one, and try again. Generally speaking, you kind of have to throw these in and out for like 5 or 10 minutes. This is a very quick process because a lot of people are doing the exact same thing. So you can buy for like 3 divs, sell for 3 divs, etc. until you can get a Heroic Tragedy that is good for your tree. This build has a very easy time finding Heroic Tragedies. You don't have to do this for too long because there's a lot of notables that we use very well due to our Crown of Eyes allowing us to benefit from spell damage. So here I have 40% spell damage, attack speed, elemental damage, and spell damage. And outside of my jump radius, I also have 40% max ES and 40% max ES here, which I'm taking with Megalo and Anoints. The notables that you're looking for this build are spell damage, elemental damage, lightning damage, attack speed, max ES, and 20% mark effect. All of these are pretty good. If you can get 4 or 5 in your jump radius and maybe 1 or 2 outside of your jump radius, that's a fantastic jewel. Next, we pick up Pain Attunement and Ancestral Bond to enable a bunch of jumps. We don't care about the crit penalty from Pain Attunement because we are non-crit, but if you want to do a very expensive crit version of this build, you can drop Pain Attunement and just anoint Mystical Rage instead. The crucial nodes to pick up here are Mystical Rage and Expendable Army. Expendable Army gives you 2 more wolves, so you have 9 wolves. This brings Predator's Mark up to a total of 10 enemies, 9 wolves and yourself, which gives 40% increased damage taken by marked targets. This is a very powerful node. Down here, the Warcry and Damage is on Weapon Set 2 for bossing, and the Area of Effect, Movement Speed, and up here the CDR is on Weapon Set 1 for mapping purposes. This section over here with Piercing Claw and Swift Claw, I am picking up only on Weapon Set 1 for mapping. This is because I have Rakiatas, so I don't need any Elemental Penetration on my Weapon Set 2 with Flame Breath. If you don't have Rakiatas, I would pick this up on your main weapon set and just drop off a little bit of damage from Weapon Set 2 to get the points for it. We pick up some ES here, some cooldown recovery rate on our mapping tree, Jewel Socket, ES, Int, and then Chaos Inoculation, jumping over to Shimmering Mirage and Abasement for Stun Threshold and Ailment Threshold based on our maximum energy shield. We have no life, so if you don't pick these up, you're going to get stunned, frozen, ignited, shocked constantly. You must have these 2 nodes, and if you can get a little bit more Stun Threshold in particular off of Jewels, right? I have a little bit of additional Stun Threshold equal to 11% of max ES on this Jewel. That's very nice as well. The only reason I'm not running a Stun Charm is because my Megalomaniac has Ignore Pain, which gives me a bunch of Stun Threshold from Rage. For Jewels, the only mandatory one is Heroic Tragedy Verana. If you can find a nice cheap Megalo, that's great to run. Do remember that if you have some transformed notables outside of your jump radius, you can potentially pick those up with the underlying nodes with a Megalomaniac. So sometimes you can snipe a pretty good cheap Megalomaniac that nobody else really wants because it fits your build specifically. On rare jewels, we are looking for max ES, faster start of ES recharge, skill speed while shapeshifted. Skill speed in general just feels very nice on Wyvern for fluidity while mapping. And then if you can get a bit of additional stun threshold equal to % of max ES, that's fantastic as well. And my final jewel, I am using a Heart of the Well with attack speed, ailment threshold equal to % of max ES, cooldown recovery rate, and energy shield from equipped body armor. You can of course also run a Heart of the Well with some gain as damage. I don't really care too much for those on shapeshifts because they're expensive, and shapeshifts have a ton of access to gain as damage already from the Empower as well as on the tree. But, you know, if you're just trying to min-max your damage, then of course a double gain as damage Heart of the Well is fantastic as well. Now, I won't go over leveling specifically because I already talked about it briefly in my previous build guide, so if you want to, you can check that out. It's in one of the timestamps near the end of the video. With respects to this build, the one thing I would note is don't go CI too early. I picked this up at around level 90. I wouldn't swap until you have at least like 8 to 9k energy shield, otherwise it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable since you're losing your flask and you're losing a little bit of life buffer. But CI is very nice. It relieves your suffixes. You don't have to pick up chaos res. You can go as much rage as you want and not really care about the life regen, or about the degen rather, as long as you pick up 1 life regen on your gear. And you don't have to worry about poison. You don't have to worry about bleed. Now, there are other options. You don't have to path all the way over here for CI. 2 other choices are, if you are very, very wealthy, you can use a Flesh Crucible with Chaos Inoculation to just take this with a Jewel Socket and skip this entire section of the tree. Those are really expensive. You would want one with either less life or less mana, but that costs like 60 to 70 divines the last I checked. So if you're really rich, you can go that route and use those points on something else, like scaling crit if you just want like big dick damage. Besides that, you can just stay with a little bit of life, not pick up CI at all. And the main advantage of that would be that you retain a little bit of life and you get to use an Olroth's Flask. Olroths are really, really expensive now, so I kind of hesitated to recommend it for this build. They're like 80 divines or something the last I checked. It's kind of crazy. They're so expensive now, but they are fantastic. They give you some guard, which expands your EHP pool even more. And what's better is when you're taking damage to guard, it's not going to your ES, so you're able to regenerate ES in combat because your Olroth's guard is kind of tanking for you. So that is also another option as an alternative to CI. In each of those cases, you save a bunch of points not going to this section, and you could reinvest that into more damage. You know, you could come down to Witch for some ES over here. You could pick up the armor ES over here, or if you really want to, you can go crit. That's about it for this build guide. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below. Not too sure what I'm gonna play next yet. If you have any recommendations, let me know. But we'll see, and I'll see you in the next video.